talked about this in a different video, in several different videos, where you can be male, then you can be a man, a boy or a man, and then you can be masculine. So by the time you're 10, you know pretty much many of the things that what a man, somebody who's male-bodied, would need to do to change from a boy to a man in that culture and behave in a masculine way. But now, when you live in the West, we have so many opportunities, so much access to different things, different ways of doing things, that I think comparatively, the amount of information you need to take in to actually make a decision on how to properly fit into the society or most effectively fit into a society takes a lot longer in the Western world today, if you listen to this, compared to what it did 100 years ago living anywhere. So I think that's something to keep into time. So the 20-year-old, I think the founding fathers were in their 20s, right? Most of them were.
Yeah.
So it's not the same. Would you imagine the founding fathers invented, they wrote the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, all those things. What do you think a group of 20-year-olds would do if they were actually inventing a country today? Would you want to live in that country? I would not. If you just think like a group of 25-years from like New York City and like start a country, I would not want to live in that country. But the United States of America is still here. So yeah.
So again, I just ask people, depending on their age, it's like, look, if you're 20-something and you think you know everything, yeah, it's a passing phase. You'll get into the real world, you'll realize that's not the case. If you're older and you're somehow deferring to these people, I would ask why, because again, what do they know that you don't know, or what do they know you're not capable of learning? As I said in, I think, the first video, every younger generation thinks they know way better than the people that came before. And they fail to appreciate that, no, there was a wisdom in the older ways, there was an insight. Now, I'm not making the reverse argument of let's appeal to tradition and just go by what older people say. No, but at the same time, don't just look at older people as sticks in the mud and that they're outdated. No, they know they've gotten some things right.
I think you can argue. I would argue on the side of more.
Yeah.
But more is not equivalent to better. Just having more of something, more quantity of information, does not mean it's more. It's better information. But before you say bye to the stuff that older generations know, at least know enough about them to know why you shouldn't still consider that to be something worth knowing. That makes some sense. Yeah, I think it does.
Well, and this also, this stuff is spread out into general other communities as well. And it's interesting is that some of the left-leaning people, like Carolyn Borisenko, who I brought up, she actually said that she was in a knitting group and that got infected with social justice ideology. And she was like, guys, I just want to do my knitting. Why are we talking about this? And then Atheism Plus, as you remember, James Lindsay talked about being disillusioned with that. And then also my own mother was talking about, she had this like Hudson Valley local or something group where they like post pictures of the Hudson Valley, comment on scenery, and people will be like, oh, did you hear what Trump said in it? It's like, come on, really? It's like, I just want to enjoy the scenery and local stuff. And it's ruined a lot of things because like I keep criticizing with sports and movies and stuff, people go to those things to escape politics. They go to those things to escape reality. They don't want to lecture on how and why they're racist in these ways and they have to change.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with having spaces where you want certain information to not be there. Now, I'll question about the people who say we want black-only spaces, basing these decisions based off of things that people had no control of. We want female-only spaces. I guess you can make some arguments for these things, but then don't be upset when the inverse, when people say we want white-only spaces, we want male-only spaces. But that whole idea of saying we want spaces that are free from certain ideas, I'm not against that as a general concept, but just make it universal, make it be something that you might have ideas that are not going to be allowed in certain places, a certain behavior. You might physically be a certain being that may not be allowed in a certain place. And you also, as a certain being, have the right and the expectation to say, I can choose and decide what other ideas I want to be exposed to, what other beings I want to spend my time with, accept that. You know, my objection to slavery isn't people deciding who to deal with. It's that person you decided you want to work for you, not being allowed to say, I don't want to work for you. That's the part I object to, not the part of somebody saying, I am different from this person, and this person is, I'll say it is worth different. I personally feel I'm personally more worth than Stephen because I myself, and I consider Stephen to be personally more worthwhile to me than 99.9999999% of the world because he's a good friend of mine. So that's something like I I would object to somebody saying, I have to have this conversation with a random person. I would prefer to have it with Steven and record it and post it and have you guys and gals and gents and females and whatnot listen to it. Okay. So yeah.
So just to sort of wrap up here, so I would say sort of like the Marxism that spawned it, a lot of these ideologies look good on paper, but if you look at what's in them, it's not the case. Lindsay likes to make the analogy of like you have this beautiful present, but then there's a complete mess inside. I've sort of made the analogy of, it's that old expression, don't judge a book by its cover. Yeah, a book can have a beautiful cover, but what's inside? That's why you're reading the book, and it's the same thing with this. Yeah, you can tell me you want to end racism, you want to fix inequality, all that, but what do you want in practice, and what is it going to take to do that? And that goes to my earlier point about totalitarianism and how, like with Marxism itself, and what worries me a bit with this stuff is when things don't pan out as they want, they become increasingly violent and repressive, and they start making excuses for why things don't pan out accordingly, and then they, again, become more violent and repressive to try and bring them about. And you get cases like the Soviet Union where people can't construct working timepieces, crops don't grow, there's shortages of some things, excesses of other things, but they're not willing to dig down into the core principles and say, no, this is flawed. Ludwig von Mises' economic calculation proves socialism doesn't work. No, they're still wedded to that idea that they're willing to go to any means to achieve the ends. And I think that's very scary, whatever your ideology is or whatever your goal is.
Yeah. And when you throw that whole idea that, oh, we're all worth the same, price calculation is impossible. Yeah. You have to be able to calculate what you do with yourself and your time. That is the basics. That's the basis of living. It's just interacting with people. Things have different value at different times, and we live in a certain order of things. So you're going to have a what's the time? I keep forgetting the actual thing. The deference of what's
time preference.
Time preference, yes. That I keep forgetting. Yeah, that time preference. Yeah. That is something that is why the world is the way it is today. By having that ability to actually.
And again, I sort of made this point in the last conversation, but they say philosophy, who needs it? Well, economics, who needs it? Well, everyone. I mean, you're buying something, you're doing economics. You're deciding what to do with your life, economics. You're saving money. Like, these are unavoidable facts of life. Even now, if you don't want to get into a scholarly discussion, okay, that's fine. But these are realities that everyone deals with. There's no escaping that. Even if you want to go to the very basic level that Rothbard and others start with, if you're on a desert island figuring out how am I going to gather food, how am I going to survive, that's economics. Economics originally was household management, so you can't escape that reality. Yeah.
I mean, it was originally household management that was mostly done. I guess it was partially, but the females had had a big hand at the mothers of the homes and things like that. And that's why I don't think. You see right now the different things in general, and that's more, I think, the schooling system. That's why I'm looking forward to this next. That's part of why I'm looking forward to this next conversation series we're going to go in with the actual information, because this whole idea that women are not able to do these things, it's just the context. I think they'd be able to understand it in different contexts from different interests, because they were interested in their own home. And I think you can see that with the different sort of voting patterns that happen once a woman is married with children. And she has that very real interest and understanding of my physical home needs this sort of economics. They kind of change their approach to the world and other issues. It's not the social justice in general for all these supposedly random people out there versus what is best for my children. And that kind of brings in a different perspective on some of this.
Well, I have this friend, she's like a moderate lefty, and she's funny because she used to be a feminist, and then she got married and had a kid, and she like completely calmed down, and she even said like modern feminists are annoying and all that. And then I remember there was this woman that she used to work with, and I showed her some of the stuff she posted, and she's like, yeah, this is why I don't identify as a feminist. But again, that experience of, well, you got married and now you have a baby boy, so it's going to change your perspective on you can rail against patriarchy, okay, but you have to raise a boy, then how is he going to be in the world? How is he going to be influenced? What problems are he going to deal with? And I think, I can't speak for her, obviously, but I think that perspective changed her a lot.
Yeah. I mean, society was created to be a better vehicle or to create better environments in order to reproduce. Yeah. And I think you have an increasing amount of people who have access to sharing their thoughts and influence in how societies ran that don't really care that much about reproduction. Yeah. And I think just having that gives you a different perspective on some aspects of society. You see a lot of actual major, powerful world leaders don't have kids. And I think you can also see something that goes into that. And it's kind of interesting to think. Thank you for listening. This has been a clip from an actual longer recording that I'll try to leave a link to on the screen or somewhere around here where you're listening to this.
Presents. 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 Presents.
Peasants.
Okay. Okay.